Good morning from very rainy Brussels today. Thank you for joining us early Monday morning with a few days to go before Christmas. My name is Walburga Hermetsberger. I am the CEO of Solar Power Europe. And together with the team and with our distinguished guests, we want to brighten up your Monday with our latest European market outlook on solar and some insightful discussions, which we'll have a little later on with solar leaders and on policy and on markets, which is kind of an early Christmas present. The one big question we do not stop getting is how fast can solar grow? So how fast can we get independent from Russian fossils and from fossils more generally with renewables and what solar's role in that? How fast can solar also help to get down the energy prices for European citizens, get down the electricity bills, help European businesses to regain competitiveness? And we get this question in particular looking into the next 2 winters, which all experts tell us will be the most challenging ones ahead. So this edition of the European Market Outlook has the answer to these questions. We are taking stock on this year, and we are looking also into solar's development in the next 4 years. Now, taking stock, if the Argentinians have won the World Cup yesterday, the European energy trophy clearly goes to solar. The sector broke all records again this year. And it was not as close as a victory as the ones of the Argentinians yesterday. Much more than we installed much more than our high scenario forecasts we still had 1 year ago. And we even installed more solar than our revised high scenario following the Russian war and Europe's Repower EU response. 2022 has been the best year ever for solar. And here are the numbers. The solar sector added 41.4 gigawatt of solar in the EU. 41.4 gigawatt. Now, what does the future hold for us? We will see further strong growth ahead. We will be doubling solar installations in 4 years' time, and it could even be better with the right framework conditions. You will hear more about all the details in a few minutes. But first, with all this great news, we also wanted to get Energy Commissioner Simson's reaction to the European Market Outlook numbers. And here is quickly the agenda, how this 1.5 hours will be looking further on. So we will hear from Energy Commissioner Simson, who came over last week to our office for a solar roasted coffee, and we had a chat, which we wanted also to share with you. And afterwards, I'm handing over to my colleague, Michael Schmeller, who will be giving you more details on the numbers, on this year's installations, but also on the forecast next year. And we will be entering into a discussion with our distinguished panelists. Before I'm starting the video, I'm going to share it with you. I would like to also congratulate the whole team, in particular the market intelligence team, but also the broader team for the excellent work they have been doing over the last couple of months on this European Market Outlook, providing you the numbers in order to go forward on these. Welcome, Commissioner Simson. We're very happy having you here at the Solar Power Europe office today, just across the street from your own offices. We have very good news to share with you because the solar sector deployed 41 gigawatt of solar this year, 41 gigawatt of installations. That means 12 million new homes are powered by solar this year. And that also means that we are by far outperforming basically our own forecasts still a year ago. That is beyond our high scenario, what the solar sector deployed. I could imagine that this is very good news to you because it's also very much delivering on the Repower EU package, making sure that Europe becomes independent from Russian fossils, from fossils more generally, making sure that we are getting down the prices for European citizens, that we are stabilizing our economies, and that we're, after all, still tackling climate change. Thanks for having your reaction to the result we are delivering.
Indeed, this is impressive and now bar is very high. So I hope that next year we will have even more impressive numbers to announce. And good morning to everybody. This year has taught us of the grave importance of a secure homegrown energy system, one that cannot be manipulated for geopolitical purposes, and that system needs to be based on renewables. Solar has a very important role to play, as it can be deployed fast and make a real difference already in the current crisis, and therefore the Commission is doing all it can to support the deployment of solar energy. With renewables at the core of our REPowerEU plan, we increased the proposed renewable energy target for 2030 to 45%, and going to 45% will be no small effort. It means more than doubling of the renewables share in the next 8 years and tripling of the deployment speed that we have seen over the last decade. With the solar strategy that we adopted this year, we are aiming to bring online over 320 gigawatts of solar photovoltaic by 2025 and almost 600 gigawatts by 2030. And these are all very ambitious plans. But with the strategy, we have set a clear policy line on how to get there. Part of it is making rooftop solar panels mandatory. To remove possible barriers to achieve our goal, the Commission has brought forward actions to speed up and simplify permitting procedures that are currently slowing down the industry. And we proposed an emergency regulation on faster permitting for renewable projects, including provisions of solar deployment in particular. Barriers also come in the form of our market design. And right now we are operating with a design that reflects our energy world of yesterday, not our renewables-based future. And early next year, we will propose a reform of the electricity market. With demand for solar energy growing, we should be ready to seize on the opportunity on the supply side. So we just launched the EU Solar PV Industry Alliance, our proposal to seize the tremendous industrial opportunity on offer. The alliance will help us to expand manufacturing capacities for more innovative, more efficient and more sustainable solar PVs. And I would also like to take the opportunity to thank Solar Power Europe for your leadership. You have always given us a very valuable perspective of the industry, and your voice is heard at the Commission, heard loud and clear. And we very much appreciate your support in ensuring that the legislation that we are making today can help us to achieve our unprecedented solar energy targets across the EU. So year 2022 has been really good for solar deployment. This is not the reason to slow down now. And let this year results give us inspiration to work harder, to lay the right foundation for the EU solar market of the future.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And indeed, we should be inspired by the installation records we've seen this year. Taking us to the ambitions that you just mentioned, 600 gigawatt installed by 2030 AC, that's 750 gigawatt DC indeed. For next year, Ursula von der Leyen and Fatih Birol, the executive director of the International Energy Agency, have just recently published or presented a report how to make sure that there's no gas shortages for the next winter. And what that report tells us is that we need to install around 60 gigawatt of solar next year, together with 25 gigawatt of wind. So these 60 gigawatts, they're in the range of our forecast of the European market outlook for next year. And by the way, we do think that in the next couple of years, also 100 gigawatt of solar can be possible. But I do think we should not take it for granted to get there. And I know that you're not taking it for granted. You just mentioned it, and the solar strategy is pushing very much to have more solar and overcome the bottlenecks. We mentioned a handful of main action points we see for the next couple of months in order to make these amounts that we need possible. So the first one is skills. We need to have workers to bring solar on the ground, on the roofs and all infrastructures. So we need to make sure not running into bottlenecks here. The second one is spatial planning, improving spatial planning. The Commission is already doing a lot on permitting, but there's still improvements which need to be made. The third one is more smoothly integrating renewables and solar, in particular into grid. So we're talking about grid investments, but also storage and flexibilities more generally. Regulatory environment, providing stability for investors. Market design is very important. And the fifth one, and not the least one, is supply chains. We need to make sure that we have the products to roll out solar massively. And that means diversifying supply chains, but also, and very importantly, making sure we have a sizable industry. You mentioned the PV Industry Alliance. We're very happy to have a sizable industry here in Europe. So I hope you agree with these 5 points. I would be curious to know what kind of actions the Commission will undertake next year on these 5 priorities.
I agree, and as you mentioned, solar will play a key role on our journey to replace Russian fossil fuels, especially natural gas. And already this spring, when we published our REPowerEU plan, then solar strategy was very important part of that strategy. And since then, we have from our side also followed up. So there have been several meetings on skills partnership, and we do know that renewable industry in the wider sense, but also solar, will offer lots of new jobs, but for that you need a skilled workforce, and this is also for us a priority to support you in this regard. And in our solar strategy, you also proposed that we will have large-scale skills partnership for renewable energy and other pacts for skills. So as you know, you have been active in this work where we have had also meetings with different stakeholders, and SolarPower is very much involved, so thank you for that. Now, what comes to the permitting, then this is a continuous effort to shorten this bottleneck. There will be several provisions in Renewable Energy Directive, but due to the fact that member states need some time to transpose these amendments when they are agreed with stakeholders, we also used this extraordinary Article 122 to breach this time frame. And I hope that this helps in the year of 2023, and especially there are provisions for solar installations. So
very grateful for that, by the way.
And we are meeting with energy ministers very often, but this permitting part was really important for several member states, and I hope that we can see results also on the ground next year. Now, what comes to the clear signals for investors, electricity market design for sure is one of the next year's most expected legislative proposals. Commission will start in these days the stakeholder consultation, and the aim of ours is to renew the design in the way that it helps renewables to cover the higher share of our electricity consumption, but at the same time allows consumers to benefit from the situation where renewables will be deployed at these high-level scales as we expect.
I'm very happy to contribute to that indeed. So our position is almost ready.
Very good. And of course, we know that we have to be also ready to connect more renewable installations into the grid. That means additional investments. We know that several member states have announced their plans how they will use the recovery funds. In this regard, these plans are also using lots of financing exactly for these purposes, to strengthen the grids. And from our side, this is a complex challenge, and part of the answer is already available in the current legislation and is being, for instance, developed through network codes and demand response. The last one, from where the solar panels will come from, and I really hope that our Solar Alliance will help us to diversify our supply change and bring some of the production back to Europe.
Thanks very much. Indeed, you mentioned grids. That is one of the areas where we do think that more needs to be done, because 70% of solar, is connected to the DSO grids, for example. So DSO should be very much in the focus, but also storage. And what we do think needs to be done as a next step is, in parallel to deployment of solar and other renewables, have a strategy on solar. So, and that's also what we understand citizens want us to do. We just recently published a report on residential storage, where it was clear that, citizens want to be active energy consumers, prosumers, and that they want to have storage. So we are very much pleading for having a dedicated storage strategy in order to massively deploy storage, helping the grids. So can we expect something from the Commission on this in next year?
With increased shares of renewables, indeed, flexibility and storage will become more important, and they are an integral part of our energy system. And we know that there are expectations from the sector. So the Commission is looking into the role of flexibility in the context of electricity market design. And in addition, the Commission is also working on staff working document on storage, which will provide a comprehensive overview of the role of energy storage in the energy transition, but it also assesses a current regulatory and financial framework for energy storage. And the staff working document will also address the existing barriers, but offers also some opportunities. So I hope that this is the first step to strengthen the storage side that will be necessary to achieve our extremely high targets for this next years and also by 2030.
This is great news. Thanks very much. We will be very happy to contribute also to the work you're doing on storage. More generally, thanks very much for your support, your support to the solar sector, to renewables more generally. And we're very much looking forward to further cooperate in a very fruitful way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For coming over.
Okay, here we go. So PV financially even more attractive today. You might know that slide from earlier reports. We've adapted it. And what you can see here is, while electricity spot prices across Europe had already reached new heights in 2021, and last year already improved power's very attractive business case, it was obviously the start of the Russian war against Ukraine in February 2022, and the following geopolitical tensions that have resulted in record high energy prices in Europe today, and big concerns of both companies and citizens about their energy supply. Let me just hear something. The consequence was that solar investments have become even more attractive across Europe, as you can see on this LCOE versus power prices slide. And this is true also for high interest rate environments. You can see in the bars actually where it's yellow, that's simply a high WACC environment. And that's also true for northern countries like Finland, which you can see on the left, where you obviously have much higher LCOEs than in the south. You will see that later, that this is also the reason why Finland, which probably few had on the agenda in the past, will become in the next 3 years a gigawatt scale solar market. Next slide, please. Next slide. As Walburga and also Kadri Simpson already mentioned, in 2022, the 27 EU member states have been seeing around 41.4 gigawatt of new solar PV capacity connected to the grid. That's preliminary and it might change. Usually it changes rather upwards in the coming months, but nevertheless, even this 41.4 gigawatt mean a 47% increase compared to 2021. In fact, last year had also been already a record-breaking year. In 2021, the market expanded by 41% to then 28 gigawatt. And also then we assumed obviously further growth, but we had not thought that it would be at all in this dimension. So even in our latest updates from May in our global market outlook, we had assumed in our high scenario that the market would be 40 gigawatts. So that means even we are a little bit at what we had assumed a few months ago in the most positive case. Okay, here we are now. The European Commission, consumers, companies have identified solar as green, affordable, and simply the unmatched rapid solution to their urgent needs to decrease dependency on Russian energy imports. And while you can see still the 2010 first wave of EU still looks big, you will soon see that this will turn very, very soon into just a small blip in the evolution and development of solar in the EU. Next slide, please. When we look at the top 10 markets, we see two newcomers, Portugal and Sweden. They are new. They replace Hungary and Austria, which actually also improved their solar performance in 2022. But that was not good enough. For the first time ever, you need to be a gigawatt scale market to be in the top 10. Unlike last year, when close to 800 megawatt was enough to make it to the top 10. In 2022, each of the top 10 markets deployed more solar than the year before. There was only one exception, and that was France, whose market actually decreased marginally. In fact, France was the only EU market that installed less solar than the year before. We have no time to go into details about the individual countries. There's plenty of background in the report, but just a few bits for the first three markets who stayed the same as the year before. So Germany adding 7.9 gigawatt was actually even higher than was the ambitious target of the new German government coalition, which was looking at 7 gigawatt. And with all these new changes, recent EEG 2023 changes, it bodes for really further growth, and the targets are ambitious. As you probably know, Germany is looking at 15 gigawatts of total installed capacity by the end of this decade. In Spain, which really went quite through the roof and surprised many, also us, it's not only the gigantic PPA merchant market, which has contributed to growth. There's now also a very fast self-consumption rooftop segment developing that should not be underestimated. One reason for Poland's growth to close to 5 gigawatt, it's also amazing how Poland further develops, was a change from net metering to net billing. So that means investment in solar got less attractive over the course of the year. So there was a little bit of a rush. But obviously, the country's proximity to the war and the people being really afraid of energy security is strongly driving demand in the country. And we see also much further growth to come. Next slide, please. When we look at total installed capacity, we see that the EU solar power generation fleet increased by 25% to 209 gigawatt from 168 gigawatt in 2021. That means that total solar capacity across the EU has exceeded 200 gigawatt for the first time. And that is only 4 years after it passed the 100 gigawatt milestone in 2018. As you can see in these bars, which are broken down to the additions of the different markets, you can simply see that Germany maintains its dominant role as the largest operator of solar power plants in the EU. Germany has now installed around 69 gigawatt, and the spread to the second one widened actually compared to the year before. Interesting is that we have now a second largest solar operator in the EU, and that is Spain. Thanks to its extraordinary growth, they are now ranking second with around 26 gigawatt of total installed solar capacity. Spain takes this spot from Italy, which was in control of the EU's second largest solar fleet for over a decade, since 2011. And although Italy actually is now also growing quite a bit, it installed 2.6 gigawatt in 2020, which was a solid performance, but simply not enough to overcome the many years it was lagging behind in European solar developments. If you look at the shares, Germany now holds around 1/3 of installed capacity in Europe. That's a little bit less than the year before, as other markets are simply catching up. Together, the EU's largest solar operators, now Germany and Spain, claim a total of 45%, which I find is quite impressive. Two countries, 45% market share in the EU. Still, this is around 4 percentage points less than in 2021, when Germany and Italy controlled almost 50%. So we're seeing a little less dominance from the big markets, simply because the other markets are also now becoming visible on the solar map in Europe, but still it's the big markets that simply dominate. So if you look at the top 10 in total, they claim around 90% market share still for the EU 27. Next slide, please. Okay, when it comes to solar per capita, there's one nice news. It's not Europe's longtime solar leader, Germany, that holds this first position anymore. For the second year in a row, the Netherlands is ranking first here, and they've reached a remarkable milestone of more than 1 kilowatt per inhabitant in 2022. That's almost 30% up from the 815 watt per capita they had the year before. Just to give you an idea, I think the only country that is in that range is the world's largest and number one in that field, and that is Australia, where the sun is obviously shining a bit brighter, but nevertheless, the Netherlands is, at least on a per capita basis, in the same dimension. I think you can also see here that for all countries, basically, this metric has improved, and that you need now, in order to be among the top 10, over 400 10 watts. That's around 50 watts more than you needed the year before in order to be in this, this top 10 per capita ranking. Next slide, please. Okay, let's look at what's ahead of us. And while 2022 has been an impressive year for the European solar sector, the next 4 years will probably be similarly impressive. If you look at this slide, I think the orange graph is our medium scenario. You will see that for 2023, we expect nearly 30% growth to 54 gigawatt of installed capacity in our medium scenario. It will be the first time that this 50 gigawatt threshold is reached, and it will only continue that way. So we will see over 60 gigawatt in 2024, over 70 gigawatt in 2025, and will reach a market of almost mind-boggling 85 gigawatts in 2026. However, we see quite some upside potential here. So if everything goes right, we believe that next year already 68 gigawatt could be installed, and that the market size could be almost 120 gigawatt in 2026. When you look at, especially next year, there was recently the IEA coming out with their gas report, and they said in order to really make sure that we're on the safe side, solar would have to install 60 gigawatt next year. With 54 gigawatt, we're almost there. If it will be a bit better, actually, we deliver what the IEA is asking for. Just also one hint, because some might really raise their eyebrows about these high numbers, but don't forget, already in the first 9 months of 2022, over 670 gigawatt of modules from China were shipped to Europe. And yes, we do have an inverter shortage, and we do have an installer shortage, and we have permitting and other challenges about which we will talk later in our panel. And that's why we have the high and low scenarios. But, and I think this is really what we really want to emphasize, we better simply prepare for the high scenarios, because usually solar surprises us in that direction, and that's simply in all our best interest. Next slide, please. Okay, let's take a look at shares today versus 2026. 41 gigawatt installed in 2022, more than doubling to 85 gigawatt in 2026. And you can simply see that a few markets will continue to dominate. Germany will even increase its share slightly from 19% today to 23% in 2026. Number 2 will stay Spain with a similar share. And what we are seeing now is that Italy has finally unleashed somewhat, and the solar boom, the long expected and hoped for solar boom, is now starting. So we expect a lot of solar to be installed in Italy, so that in 4 years' time, Italy will be the 3rd largest market in the European Union. Next slide. What we also see is that there is some diversification taking place, and these markets are also quickly growing. So we had 10 markets that were on a gigawatt scale this year. Germany, Spain, Poland, Holland, France, Italy, Portugal, Denmark, Greece, and Sweden. And that will only grow. So we will see already in 2025, 16, and 2026, 18 markets. So that means we will have basically 2/3 of the European Union having gigawatt scale markets in 4 years of time. That's actually great that we're seeing this growth across the board. Next slide, please. Okay. If we look at total installed capacities, we are quickly approaching the 500 gigawatt or half terawatt operating fleet. We expect that to happen in just 4 years. So exactly, we see 484 gigawatts to be installed by the end of 2026. So that means in any case, we will have more than double the 209 gigawatt of installed capacity from now. What's interesting, and that's a mere coincidence, but REPowerEU medium target for 2025 is 320 gigawatt AC, and if you calculate that into DC, you are at 400 gigawatt in 2025, and actually that's almost at the point what we have modeled, and in our bottom-up model, we come to 399 gigawatt by 2025. So there's only 1 gigawatt difference, and it's interesting because when the Commission came out with their 400 gigawatt number, actually in May, a lot of people considered it overly ambitious at the time. Also, we thought, wow, that's early. We thought it's leaning somewhat more towards the 2030s when the market is really coming up. But according to our latest modeling, so we're spot on with what the Commission actually is targeting. But that changes then later on for 2030. Next slide, please. We usually come up with this weather forecast, so where we simply look at the market growth, not just on the mere numbers, but also on the political support prospects. And in general, we are very upbeat, and it's mostly sunny. We just have 3 countries actually where we're just a little bit I wouldn't say concerned, but I think we have to look at what's going on there. Last year that was Italy, but that's now under control. But what we even with the new government, but what we see here is Romania. Their large PV projects planned on agricultural lands are facing difficulties as the agricultural ministry recently rejected most requests for installations over 50 hectares. So we have to see what's happening there. Another country facing difficulties in the utility scale segments is Denmark. Though the large-scale subsidy-free projects are the largest contributors to the annual market there, the increase in grid connection fees expected from 2023 will hamper the financial viability. And finally, there's the recent announcement by the Hungarian government to suspend the possibility for new solar installations to feed their electricity to the grid, which is also putting the sector on high alert. Beyond those countries, there are still a number of issues that need to be fixed within the EU to realize the solar potential, and we've outlined that in our policy recommendations. However, overall, the outlook for solar is only getting brighter. So we anticipate now the largest 15 EU solar markets to grid connect around 260 gigawatt of new capacity in the coming years based on our probable medium scenario. This is in comparison to 152 gigawatt, which we forecasted last year. Okay, next slide. This is basically what we've been doing for 2 years now. We always look at the national energy and climate plans of the member states, and there's a revision due in 2023. We simply look at how the national targets develop against reality. And if we look at our latest scenarios, we simply see that 3/4 of the EU member states will have reached their 2030 NECP targets no later than 2025. So that means 5 years early, while the last quarter will also reach that by 2027. So in other words, everyone will have reached 3 years early their target. And if you accumulate that, actually, that number would be reached already in 2025. So what it also tells us here is that the current NECPs all severely underestimate solar growth. And for the revisions, the stakeholders, the national stakeholders, have to be aware simply in which direction the solar market is going, and that they really implement that into their new targets. Next slide. We're coming to an end, and then soon. So it's no surprise that the 2030 outlook is almost 3 times higher than the 335 gigawatt NECP target. What's most striking is that our new medium scenario for 2030, which is 920 gigawatt, again overshoots the European Commission's REPowerEU strategies target of 750 gigawatt DC. Commission always talks about AC, so it's 600, what they are usually talking about. You have to always translate it into DC in order to compare it with our numbers. So that means our new number is 170 gigawatt higher than the for our medium scenario than the 750 gigawatt target of the Commission. Previously, we were expecting 672 gigawatt, so we're quite a bit more optimistic. What you also see here, we've done that the first time, modeled a high scenario. And in this high scenario, we see that the market could be almost as big as 1.2 terawatt in 2030 in the EU 27. That might look a lot. Next slide, please. But we've got to go there actually to meet or to stay on the 1.5 degree Paris target. And I want to show you also one other slide to simply put our forecasting into perspective. Here on this final slide, you see the global learning curve for solar PV. Longji showed that at the recent World Conference in Milan. And here you simply see that the annual PV installation capacity doubles every 3 years. And if you assume that around 250 gigawatt would be installed globally this year, so we would reach the annual terawatt installation already before 2030. And we've just put together here also in comparison the maximum what the IEA in their NZE scenario and IRENA in their WETO 2022 scenario show in terms of solar installation. And there's quite a bit of a gap. So I think what's key is simply that we think big, because this global annual terawatt market globally is ahead of us. And And in Europe, things are also now moving much faster than we anticipated. Quick. Next slide. Just in summary, 2022 might be remembered in Europe as the year the solar age truly began. We've seen 4 gigawatt of newly installed capacity, almost 50% year-on-year growth. All but one country have installed more solar than the year before. We anticipate 54 gigawatt actually in 2022 and 85 gigawatt in 2023, and 85 gigawatt in 2026. We see expansion of solar technologies across the European Union, from 10 gigawatt markets in 2022 to 18 gigawatt markets in 2026. The market will grow to 500 gigawatt by 2026, 400 gigawatt by 2025, and we will go close to the terawatt level by 2030, which is already higher again than what the Commission is anticipating. We ask all the member states to take that into consideration when working on their NECPs. And we're seeing actually the right conversation taking place and the right initiatives are being taken on the EU level. But a lot more is needed to provide a smooth route to solar, especially on the member states level. And that's when I want to start discussing now with our distinguished panel. Next slide, please. I'm very happy to have with us Aristoteles Chantavas, who is the head of Europe at Enel Green Power. He's also the president of Solar Power Europe. Enel, you all know, one of the world's leading companies active primarily in utility scale solar, also other renewables. I'm also happy to have with us Dr. Wolfgang Gründlinger, who's the chief evangelist of Enpal, a German solar unicorn, which closed an impressive round of 850 million in financing last week and is focusing on the solar rooftop market. And I'm also happy to have with us Michiel Sleumers, who is the director of strategy at Sunrock. He's also on the board of the National Solar Association of the Netherlands, Holland Solar. And Sunrock is primarily active in the commercial segment. So we have basically all the three segments being represented. Next slide, please. Okay, so what I would like to do is I would like to have the discussion a little bit around our policy asks, which are key of our for our EU market outlook, because in the end, it's on the one hand a document showing the growth, but on the other hand, it's also a policy document which we use to lobby politicians. And one of the key issues we're seeing, and that has also hampered this year's growth market, would have been probably much bigger if we had simply more installers. So we asked member states to thoroughly analyze and access the skills gap, and member states should also incentivize companies to undertake their own training programs. So so maybe to all of you, so being active in solar. So first of all, before we go into the gap discussion, how do you see the market forecast that we are prognosing? So is an 80 gigawatt annual market in 2026 on your radar? Is that what you see? Maybe even potentially even in the 100 gigawatt plus range earlier. Can you handle that? Maybe Aristoteles first.
Yes, Miguel, First of all, thanks for having me today. I think it's a great annual appointment that we share our projections with the rest of the market as Solar Power Europe. It's clear that the situation you described is something that we experience around us, and the numbers definitely reflect the great potential of Europe to scale up solar energy. Of course, today what we need to do is to move into actions, because the forecast is nice. I mean, we can show some nice numbers, but without actions today, it will stay only an ambition and not a reality in some years. So I think that it's very important for us to tackle the main challenges that we are facing. And you already mentioned one, which is the workforce, about skilling, reskilling, upskilling. This is of major importance to ensure a growing pool of workforce that will bring us with this capacity online. The second main pillar is regulation. We need to establish an appropriate and stable regulatory framework. Recently, we've seen several market interventions that practically don't help. Let's say, different countries, let's say, not only contribute to this scope, but may discourage investments.
Okay. And Wolfgang, I think you're growing so rapidly. When I look at your website, there's always more teams being mentioned. And so, how are you seeing this this market growth on the one hand, and how are you trying to manage that growth with getting enough people?
Yeah, first of all, please don't look at our website, because it's well, it's not the nicest website that we have. We are good at everything, but not good at marketing. We rather do things and implement things than market them. So I think that differentiates us from other actors perhaps on the market. But I mean, we hired now more than 1,000 installers. We founded our own training center and our own installation firm not even 2 years ago, and now it's the biggest installation firm in Europe. On the one hand, that makes us also proud, because we are now really large. On the other hand, wow, I mean, if we can make it after not even 2 years, after founding our own installation firm and our own training center, to become the largest actor in the market with it in entire Europe, you know what is still to be done. So it's still 1% we have done, 99% is still ahead of us. So it's a long journey. And the good thing about solar installation is that the people on the roof that you see also here on the picture, the roofers, the installers, they can be trained with a solid program within a couple of weeks only. The real bottleneck is the electricians, because they need a better training that takes 3 years, sometimes more. And that is the real bottleneck, because many people who are experienced electricians, they now retire, they drop out of the labor market, and there is not enough people entering the labor market, in particular, not in crafts, and in particular, not electricians. So that's the real bottleneck. It's not the installers. You can train them in short time. It's rather the electricians.
But I found that really interesting when I heard from a colleague of yours I talked to, that you differentiate actually between the AC and the DC teams. So that means you have the electricians who really just come to grid connect the systems, while you for the DC teams, then you, I think, took a lot of, or hired a lot of people from former delivery services that didn't need so much people after the pandemic was over, because people went to restaurants again. So is it also about organization, or
it is?
How real is it?
It is all about organization. So our electricians who need that long training, because it's a very complex task, they only come to the construction site to basically connect the cables and switch on the system. Everything else is being prepared for them in advance. So there is the DC installers. They climb on the roof, they install the solar panels on the roof. And then there is the AC installers, and they prepare everything for the electrician so that the electrician can just arrive, connect the cables, switch on the system, and sign that everything is fine and accepted. So it's all about organization, and of course also about good payment and good working environments. So many people come to us because they sometimes double their wages to the job compared they had before. Then we, like in Germany, we say still C, so it's very formal usually. So it's like a Mr. Gründinger, it's not Wolfgang. At Enpal, it's always Wolfgang. It's always the first name. It's flat hierarchies, and it's something that is meaningful. Everything like if the car is broken, whatever, whatever happens, someone is taking care for it. So electricians can focus on what they should focus on. The installers focus on what they must focus on. And so we can bring speed into it. And now we are building way over 2,000 solar energy systems per month, which is double as much or triple basically as we installed last year. And no one else in the German market ever has installed more solar energy systems before. And that made us the fastest growing energy firm across Europe. So that's quite impressive what we achieved.
Okay, cool, thanks. Michiel, you're also active in installations. Your installations are somewhat bigger than what Enpal is doing, so it takes also a little bit more time. So what's your approach and to manage growth? How do you react to those numbers, and how are you preparing to deal in this or act in this market environment?
Well, thanks, Michael. I think we are active in the commercial rooftop market. So this is the largest segment, from about 500 kilowatt peaks up to 5-6 megawatts. I like what Wolfgang said. We experienced the same problem of skilled labor. I think in the process of developing commercial roofs, we are short of everything. Also legal specialists, financial specialists, and whatever it takes to get the bigger project developed first. So I think we really see struggle to attract talent, and we're scaling up teams now to get project developed in 2024 and 25. We're already thinking how to be prepared for this, and I really think it's good to represent our sector in a way that we are attractive, and we are the future of the energy sector. And I see it's a really positive thing. We are able to attract the best people to our sector, and I think we should be keep doing that in order to succeed, because the potential is really there. I'm really excited that it's going the way it's going at the moment.
Okay, we as Solar Power Europe are also trying to help. So we recently started our SolarWorks platform, which is a matchmaking platform for those who are looking for people in the solar sector, and those who are actually willing to work in the solar sector. So if you're interested, please take a look at our digital platform. So maybe next point that we have, next slide please, is regulatory stability. Aristoteles already mentioned that. So on the one hand, we need obviously stable conditions, that what investors need. On the other hand, we see at the moment market interventions. We see even discussions about how to optimize the electricity market, and some people would like to have it even faster than slower, although that's probably something which has grown over many decades that needs quite some thorough thinking before you change that and probably mess things up. So maybe tell us, Sturgis, once again, can you just elaborate a little bit what you are seeing concretely, and what are the worst things you are seeing that should not happen, so that the solar market can, especially on the utility scale market, can contribute as much as it does now, because the prospects were actually quite bright for utility scale solar.
First of all, what we see is not really a surprise. I mean, we have 27 member states, and there are many different approaches that are taken in the last months. Even though centrally, Europe aimed to streamline, let's say, this EU-wide cap of 180 euros per megawatt hour, there were different benchmarks in different member states. So in some cases also we saw some measures that were applied retroactively, which is a big and negative impacts. And we've seen historically that these things have, let's say, really deteriorated the investment appetite in several countries. So it's very important to avoid retroactive measures. But on the other hand, it's important to ensure that all the interventions are limited in time, and they will have always the aim to protect the vulnerable consumers. So for this purpose, it's very important to have a clear guidance and monitoring by the European Commission. The last topic I'd like to mention would be the reform of electricity market design. This is something that we've been discussing the last decades to see how this will regulate the higher penetration of renewables. And this is important today also to contribute in this effort. Therefore, it's important the entire process to be done with transparency and proper consultation time to integrate the views of different stakeholders.
Okay. Anyone else wants to say something about that topic? Michiel, Wolfgang?
Yes, I think I like what Aristoteles said. I think you have to be cautious. Solar market is becoming bigger, so we have a bigger operational base in Europe every year. So we are really becoming a player, but it's good to see things separate from development and investment appetite. There are two separate things, and I think yeah, if you need regulatory stability, you need both of them to be taken care of. So
okay, but have you gotten feedback actually also from banks or investors at the moment that are getting concerned? Because when I was talking to some developers also, they said, okay, especially the medium companies that are not, and I was talking recently to one in Germany where this whole thing should be revenue based and not profit based, and they simply said, hey, banks are losing somewhat confidence in these companies, and especially those who really need a lot of financing projects might run into trouble. Are you seeing things like that, Michiel?
Well, at the moment, I think banks are getting a bit more cautious. We expected it to be worse, actually. It depends on the countries. I think we were quite okay with the Northern European measures compared to some other countries. So we are. I think the finance we have secured so far is mostly done before the announcement of the cap. So they will remain in place, but it has to be seen whether we see more difficulties in the coming year. we don't know yet.
Okay. Then maybe let's go to the next point in our policy recommendations, and this is about don't forget the grid that goes to both the transmission, but also more and more the distribution grid. We're seeing a big rush of also rooftop systems being connected to the grid, and I think certain things need to be addressed here. So maybe Michiel, you can also talk about that, because you're Dutch, and from the Netherlands we hear quite some concerns about grid capacities, maybe which have also something to do with the net metering, because there's no flexibility in the market and storage doesn't play a role because it's not attractive in a net metering environment. But nevertheless, maybe you can address that.
Yes, well, I can be quite simple. I think for the commercial and utility scale solar, the grid has been the limiter for growth last year. I think we would have performed much better if we didn't have run into this problem. I think it's very widespread now. Our country's not that big, so we have basically grid congestion everywhere. And I think the lesson we can learn is, to start early and embrace this potential that we have, because it's solvable. And I think maybe there can be lessons from the Dutch example, where we're solving it right now, that we can apply so that we don't see it in other places in Europe. I'm wondering if Wolfgang is already experiencing this throughout Germany or Aristoteles in Southern Europe.
Well, yeah, what we struggle most with is actually not so much about the grid operation. It's rather bureaucracy that holds us back. So it's over-regulation, because this way we cannot really solve in an entrepreneurial fashion. We have to deal with politicians and regulatory bodies. So that's rather what's holding us back. When it comes to the grid, what really hinders us from being even faster and smoother is, first of all, that Germany is divided into 900 areas of grid operators, and everyone has its own rules and its own forms to connect the energy system to the grid. Even though it's a very small home-owned system, it's not a large utility. It's just like a small 10 kilowatt plant. But still, we have to have the approval by the grid operator. And we are talking now to 900 grid operators with different rules and forms. And then there is a smart meter gateway rollout that has been started in like 10 years ago. And still the rollout in Germany is 0%. Other European member states, they are at 100%, and I have the second generation being rolled out, or third, and we are still not even starting. But I'm kind of hopeful and optimistic that now it comes into the rollout now. At least we're working on this as also a smart meter operator, and we are rolling out the smart meter gateways as we speak.
Okay. Aristoteles, anything from
yes, also on utility scale, I think that especially even in countries that have taken decisive steps to accommodate permitting in the last years, now we see that the key bottleneck is grid. So we have project delays, we have even cancellations, curtailments, which of course doesn't help and doesn't provide a good, let's say, environment for investments. It's important, the grid reinforcement and expansion, to be of high priority for policymakers, in my view. This will make sure that when we create all the other conditions in permitting, supply chain, and all the other, let's say, obstacles that we face, we will have the necessary infrastructure to connect our projects. That's why flexibility and battery storage are also of utmost importance to be incorporated, by even having some 2030 targets on this. And in my opinion, it's important also to have grid development plans which are aligned and coordinated with the renewable expansion targets. The grid reinforcement and development should be possibly considered in the overriding public interest regulation that we have these days in the European Union. And also the system operators, it's important when planning the grid developments to consider the climate neutrality targets, which is very important to attract more investments in renewables.
Okay, we're asking also, and that's in line basically with what the Commission is asking for solar to be a standard feature. The Commission is asking really for make solar mandatory for new and existing commercial buildings. So how much would that help you? Michiel, Wolfgang, so if basically you would know what's happening, I think in Baden-Württemberg, the state of Baden-Württemberg in southern Germany, as of this year, there is a mandatory component for certain solar systems. I don't know if any of you have been active there.
Yeah, I think it's nice to have, but it's not my top one priority to have a mandatory solar system obligation. Why? Because usually if you now like to have a solar energy system, at least here in Germany, you wait usually for 6 months or 12 months. Except with us, you wait for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. But mostly in the market, because of the lack of installers and the lack of material, you have usual waiting periods of 6 months, 12 months. So it really depends. People want it, people install it like voluntarily. So you have to make sure that this obligation doesn't turn into a bureaucratic nightmare, because people want it anyways, they do it anyways, and they have to wait for it for a year. So this would be not my #1 priority when it comes to policymakers.
Okay, Michiel?
Yeah, I agree with Wolfgang. I think it's really nice to have, but I see, at least in our market, also real mentality change in the building owners market. There is a real mentality, a real push to go for solar. I think a few years ago, we'd still see new buildings, especially in logistics, being developed without roof-bearing capacity for solar. I think that is over now. It's really a push coming from our clients. Of course, it's a nice to have to add, but in the markets where we are active, we see more important problems than this at the moment. So.
And how do you see the topic of third-party investment models? I think this is probably one for Enpal, where your business model is mostly based on that. So are you seeing a lot of issues with that in Germany and also beyond? I think you're expanding.
Yeah. So what Enpal does is that that the customer, so the homeowner, is renting the solar energy system from us. So we will also introduce a purchase or financing model, but at the moment we only do the renting model, which is solar as a service. So it's not that the homeowner would rent his roof to us. It's rather vice versa, that the homeowner rents the solar energy system from us and pays a fixed fee for that. And I mean, other business models also work, because everything that makes it easy for the end user to do it is good. Be it renting the solar system with a flat fixed fee, or renting out the roof to a third party. Both is fine. Everything where the customer just has to sign and say, yes, I want it, and saves a bit of money with it, and produces clean electricity, and hopefully also becomes a prosumer and has its own electricity from his own roof or her own roof, and also charges his or her car with it and the heat pump, and also can connect it into a smart energy community, rather than optimizing only for his or herself, or just feeding everything into the grid very stupidly. Everything that makes it easier, faster, smarter is good, and all third-party models should be there and should be tried out.
Okay, but are you seeing from a regulatory point of view, are you facing challenges?
Yeah, sometimes policymakers forget about us because they only know from the past, like this old business model of selling the solar energy system to the homeowner, and then that's it. Everything that is different, that is new, that is innovative, even though also solar as a service is on the market now for more than 10 years, but still it used to be a niche and now it's really big already. So every fourth, like at least in Germany, other European countries are not so much about that, but in Germany, 25% of all new systems being installed are rented and not purchased. So that's quite a big share in the market. And because it's relatively new, policymakers in Brussels and in Berlin often forget about that. So you have to remind them that you exist.
Okay. And next slide, please, Chiara. So if we, when people think about permitting issues, people usually think about wind, but actually we're also facing quite some issues in solar in Europe as well. Can you maybe share some experience and what you think should be done first and foremost, because the Commission has come out with a proposal for how to handle permitting. Aristoteles, maybe?
Yes, permitting, of course, there have been some improvement steps in the last years, but permitting for solar PV can take up to 5 years now. So it's, in my view, it's very important the member states to designate the priority areas of low environmental footprint as soon as possible, so that developers will know how, let's say, fast and how what are the suitable areas to develop our projects. The second pillar, in my view, would be the involvement of local authorities and communities from an early stage to understand and realize the benefits of renewable energy, to achieve local acceptance. And to do this, we need to staff and skill the local, the regional and national authorities, which is of utmost importance in solar permitting. On the other hand, it's good to have guidelines by member states for strategic environmental assessment and environmental impact assessment for solar development, because the bigger the size of new installations, the biggest the challenges we will start facing, taking the paradigm of wind industry. So the last point that is very important would be the transparency. So in several areas, we see that the lack of digitalization, the lack of one-stop shops, the experience that we face in different countries doesn't, let's say, help in highlighting the transparency of the process. And this also drops the investment appetite by different stakeholders. So I think that these main ideas would be very useful for accelerating the permitting in solar in the next years in Europe.
Okay. Michiel, Wolfgang, so I think how are you seeing permitting on the rooftop side of things?
Yes, I think on the commercial roof, I agree with Aristoteles. We really need further staffing and skilling of local administrators that can handle the permitting as we grow. I also think that as we enter some new segments like the floating and the carport market, we're going to need it to reach our targets, and it shouldn't be made more complex. It should be made more easy and streamlined. So I definitely think the streamlining is one point for the policymakers to start implementing early on.
Okay.
Yeah, indeed, streamlining is a very good point. Now, the last reform of the Renewables Act made it compulsory for grid operators in Germany to have or to build a joint online platform to make it easier for customers and and businesses like us alike to get the approval and not have 900 different forms. But now they got 2 years of time to implement this joint online platform. And from my experience with Germany in digitization, they now do 1 year and 11 months nothing. And then there will be 1 month and they realize, oh, we have to have this joint online platform. And then they just upload 900 different PDFs. So I think we can be smoother and faster and more digitalized and more automatized in particular. And so I think there's lots of what can be faster and smoother when it comes to bureaucracy and administration, because this is something that really holds us back, that costs us time and money and nerves. So I hope that we can push at this front even a bit more.
Okay, maybe the last point that we have is, next slide, Chiara, please, is an important one. And this is about green and reliable manufacturing and transparent sourcing. So we have one company, Enel, that is not only one of the world's leading renewables developers, but they also moved into, they've been actually active in manufacturing quite a while. Now they've been stepping up. So maybe Aristoteles, can you just briefly say what a little bit about your manufacturing approach, if the Europeans are finally getting it, because I think a lot has happened in the last 3 weeks in terms of policy commitment, and also how you look at module sourcing, because on the one hand, you're working on your own module production, but on the other hand, of course, you also need low-cost modules in order to build all these projects you want to build.
First of all, it's clear and obvious that we need sustainable and reliable supply chains, and the dependence of our industry on imports is very high today. We at Enel realized it very, let's say, soon enough, I would say. So we converted ourselves even to manufacturers, which is not our core business. We built in Catania in Sicily one gigafactory for, let's say, producing European panels, which is one of the most innovative facilities around the world. But in our view, one gigafactory is not enough. The world today is not the same as when we started building our facility in Catania. And we also have the Inflation Reduction Act in the US that has changed completely the spectrum. So of course, we endorse the EU Solar Industry Alliance that we had the last weeks, which was public. But it's very important to realize that today we need real, ambitious, and accelerated financial support for large-scale PV manufacturing projects in Europe to ensure that we have a domestic supply chain. So I think that we should, let's say, take the example of the US. We should support a competitive OPEX structure, but also CAPEX support for the entire supply chain to make sure that we get more autonomous in building our projects to ensure the development that we forecast in our European market outlook numbers.
Okay, I think we are almost running out of time. So maybe one final question. Okay, 5 days to Christmas. If you had a wish to accelerate solar deployment in Europe to reach the terawatt level by 2030, which our high scenario considers possible. So what would that be?
For me, grids. We need to have the grids. We need to have the infrastructure, because I think that there are different steps that are really ambitious in all other dimensions, from permitting to regulation to supply chain, but grids need to run faster.
Okay. Michiel?
Yeah, for me, I think it is the national government to start to wake up and realize the real potential of solar that is here and that we've shown. I think on a European level, the people, the policymakers really start to get it, but on a national level, a lot of awakening is still being has to be done, and I hope they can see the potential that we can, and then make and pave the road for us a little bit in terms of policy.
Okay, thanks, Wolfgang.
I agree with both, with Michael and Astralis. I think we need 10 gigafactories along the entire supply chain, in addition to what we get from Asia. We love our Chinese suppliers. They are very reliable, and we have very deep and trustful corporations with them. We have an office in Shenzhen in China and talk to them every day, basically. But in addition to what we get from Asia or from China, it's key that we build or rebuild rather our own PV industry in Europe, and I think this is also to be in Europe and not in the US or Canada, but also in Europe, because beyond and apart from all geopolitical reasoning, you don't put all the eggs in one basket, and at least one of those eggs should be here at home.
Okay, I think that's a bitter lesson we're just learning right now. Thanks to all three of you. That was very insightful. And now back to Walburga for the final words.
Thanks a lot, Michael. Thanks to the great panelists, Telis, Wolfgang, and Michiel. Indeed, just rounding up, 2022 has been a great solar year with the 41.4 gigawatt of solar that the solar sector installed. We're on track for the European Commission's Repower EU goals for 2025, but also 2030, where we will probably go beyond the European Commission's ambition. We heard from Enel Green Power, Enpal, and Sunrock what more needs to be done in order to really unleash the full potential of solar in the next coming years. So all we need to do is get it right. Solar is ready, and now the energy system needs to get ready for solar. The report is available on our webpage if you want to go into the details. The full video of the commissioner will also be made available. Now, for me, it's about to thank you for joining us here today. We are very much looking forward also welcoming you at one of the webinars in the next year. Two things I still want to mention coming up in the beginning of next year are the Solar Quality Summit on the 24th and 25th of January in Barcelona, and our flagship report, our yearly flagship event, not report, our yearly flagship event, the Solar Power Summit on the 8th and 9th of March in Brussels. So it would be great to see you all there in person in Brussels. So thanks again for joining us today. I wish you Merry Christmas and a very happy 2023, a very successful solar year, hopefully. See you all back in the next year. Thank you.